Imagine staring at a heavy wooden door you just shoved closed to escape a freezing, violent downpour.
You're exhausted.
Right. You're exhausted, you're shivering, and you're just incredibly grateful for the shelter. But as your eyes adjust to the dark, you notice the hardware on the door.
The locking bracket.
Exactly. The locking bracket isn't on the inside with you, it is on the outside.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you haven't just found a sanctuary from the storm. You have just walked into a trap.
And that realization completely shatters, like, our standard understanding of wilderness survival.
It really does.
Because we are so conditioned to view nature as the primary adversary when we go off the grid.
Right, a storm, a steep drop, maybe a wild animal.
Exactly. Those are variables we can calculate. But when the architecture of a space reveals human malice, well, the entire threat assessment paradigm just completely collapses.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're exploring a first-hand account from a solo backpacker that, honestly, it reads like a genuine horror story.
It really is terrifying.
But our mission today isn't just to recount what happened out there in the Cherokee National Forest. We are going to analyze the failures of human threat assessment.
Yeah, the psychology behind it.
Right. We want to understand the biological mechanics of survival, the meticulous construction of a psychological trap, and, why our brains can betray us when we need them the most.
The central thesis we're dealing with today is how an environment literally forces cognitive compromise. Because when physiological needs become desperate, our ability to detect deception is the very first thing we sacrifice.
Let's look at the baseline here. Our narrator is a 25 or 26-year-old guy.
Young.
Yeah, pre-marriage, pre-kids.
Okay.
He possesses that specific brand of invincibility complex that is so common in your 20s.
We all had it.
Right. He seeks out isolation. His whole routine involves driving to these remote Appalachian trailheads, walking miles away from marked paths, and getting entirely disconnected from cell service.
Which really establishes his high threshold for risk. This isn't someone easily spooked by a snapped prig in the woods. He is a highly competent navigator who basically operates with a baseline assumption that he can handle, whatever the environment throws at him.
Right up until day 2 of this specific trip. Because the inciting incident here isn't a person, it's a massive barometric plunge.
A weather event.
Yeah, dark clouds build to the west, and within an hour, this manageable hike just turns into a catastrophic storm.
It drops fast.
The temperature plummets, the wind is literally bending small trees sideways, and lightning starts striking incredibly close.
And he's totally exposed.
Exactly. Consider his physical reality right now. He is at a high elevation, totally exposed, carrying 30 pounds of conductive metal on his back in a freezing downpour.
That is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the terrible decisions that follow, you really have to understand the biological override happening in his brain right then.
It's pure survival tunnel vision.
Right. It's like a triage nurse in an emergency room. If a patient comes in with a paper cut and a severed artery, the nurse completely ignores the paper cut.
Obviously.
So in this freezing rain, his brain acts as that triage nurse. It stops evaluating long-term or abstract risks and only focuses on stopping the immediate threat of hypothermia.
And the clinical mechanism for that is an amygdala hijack.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, as his core temperature drops, the brain actually physically reroutes blood flow.
Wow, literally reroutes it.
Yeah, it pulls oxygenated blood away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for complex problem solving, logic, and recognizing anomalies.
Right.
And it sends that blood to the limbs for immediate action and to the core just to keep him warm.
So he's not thinking straight at all.
Not at all. His cognitive function is biologically narrowed down to a single imperative, which is just find a barrier against the wind.
Which perfectly explains why he doesn't hesitate at all when he spots this dark, ancient-looking one-story cabin partially hidden in the trees.
He just goes for it.
Yeah, he just sprints for it, shoves the door open, and collapses inside. It smells rank, it's pitch black, but it blocks the wind.
Because his prefrontal cortex is offline. He isn't surveying the room for safety. He is simply experiencing the absence of freezing rain.
Just pure relief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes time for the body to realize the immediate environmental threat has passed.
So about 15 minutes later, he stops shivering enough to actually pull out his flashlight and look around.
And that's when it changes.
Oh, completely. This is where the narrative shifts from a battle against the elements into a profound, chilling, psychological horror story.
The details are wild.
He shines the light and sees a chair, a cot frame, an old sleeping bag, some cans, and then he sees the walls.
Because the return of his cognitive function is what allows him to finally process, the forensic evidence of his surroundings.
Right. He spots dozens of random deep scratches just gouged into the wood near the door.
Like someone was trapped.
Yeah. So he checks the door itself, and like I mentioned earlier, there is a simple latch inside, but an industrial metal bracket designed for a heavy padlock is mounted on the exterior frame.
It can only be locked from the outside.
Exactly. So he moves to the single window. Screws have been drilled deep into the frame from the outside, basically securing the glass permanently shut.
It's unbelievable.
And the inside of that wooden window frame, it's covered in more deep scratches as if someone had desperately tried to pry the wood apart with their bare hands.
It's a makeshift prison.
Now, I have to push back on his next move here, because I think anyone listening to this is just screaming, "Get out of there!"
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if I realize I am standing inside an actual functional holding cell in the middle of uncharted woods, I am taking my chances with the lightning. Why on earth does he stay?
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychology of rationalization
Yeah?
and temporal discounting.
What does that mean in this context?
You are looking at the scenario with a fully oxygenated, comfortable brain. He is looking at it through the lens of extreme cognitive dissonance.
He's still recovering.
Right. He has two competing threats right now. You've got the storm outside, which is this massive, immediate auditory and physical reality.
That's happening right now.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the cabin, which represents a severe but completely abstract historical threat.
So his brain basically tells him the guy who built this trap isn't here right now, but the storm definitely is.
Precisely that. He examines the sleeping bag, and he notes the heavy layer of dust.
Okay, so it looks old.
Yeah, the cans are rusted. He builds this comforting narrative that whatever horrific event happened here, it happened months or even years ago.
He's tricking himself.
The human brain is remarkably adept at minimizing abstract danger just to avoid immediate physical pain. He bargains with himself that the threat is dormant.
But the threat isn't dormant.
No, it's not.
An hour passes. The rain is just deafening against the metal roof. Yet over that roar, he registers a sound that shouldn't be there.
The scratching.
A distinct scraping along the outside wall, followed by two heavy thumps on the porch.
See, the isolation of his senses is critical here. The storm provides incredible acoustic cover for whoever is outside.
While simultaneously trapping the narrator in, a state of sensory deprivation.
Exactly. He is blind to the exterior because of that single screwed shut window, and the rain totally masks the directional origin of the sounds.
So he freezes. He tries to convince himself it's a branch, but then logic kicks in. He remembers there were no low-hanging branches anywhere near the structure.
Paranoia sets in.
He is staring at the wall, just too terrified to approach the window because looking out means someone could be looking in.
Which is a terrifying thought.
And then we get the climax of this psychological torture. Pressure is applied to the door.
Oh, man.
Someone leans their entire body weight against the wood. The frame creaks, the latch rattles, and then they just step back.
They don't try to force it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if we look at the mechanics of a break-in, this makes no sense.
Not at all.
The door was completely unlatched from the inside. If the person outside wanted to enter, all they had to do was push. They weren't trying to breach the cabin.
No, they were confirming containment.
Wow. Confirming containment.
Yeah. Understanding the intent of an adversary changes your entire response matrix. When the latch rattles and the door holds, the attacker learns that the occupant is inside and compliant.
They're trapped.
The unlatched door wasn't an invitation to come in. It was a test of the trap's integrity. It's totally a predator and prey dynamic.
And that specific realization that he is an active participant in a hunt, that is what finally breaks his paralysis.
He snaps out of it.
He realizes the storm is no longer his primary problem. He starts packing his gear frantically, but, he's too late.
Yeah, the transition from the mere spread of violence to kinetic physical destruction. It happens in a matter of seconds.
He is 30 seconds from the door when the glass of the window suddenly shatters.
It escalates so fast.
Something heavy is thrown inside. Instantly, the entire room erupts into a solid wall of heat and flames.
An explosion!
He slams his body against the door to escape, but the door doesn't budge. In that brief window of time, the attacker locked the trap from the outside.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to examine the physics of that fire.
Right, because it doesn't make sense.
No. A damp, rotting wooden structure in a freezing downpour does not spontaneously combust into a room-filling inferno just from a single thrown object.
It wouldn't catch that fast.
Exactly. That level of instantaneous combustion defies natural thermal dynamics completely.
You saying the room was rigged?
The wood had to be pre-treated with a heavy chemical accelerant. The walls were literally soaked.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't random.
This entirely rules out a crime of opportunity. I mean, an opportunistic predator might use a weapon they just have on hand. But prepping a remote structure with accelerants, outfitting it with exterior locks, and patrolling it during a severe storm, that requires intense, meticulous premeditation.
So it was planned.
This was a designed execution chamber.
And he is trapped in an actively burning execution chamber. He throws his entire body weight against the door in an absolute panic and eventually tears the rotting hinges right out of the frame.
Pure adrenaline.
He rides the heavy wood down to the mud and scrambles out into the freezing rain. But he doesn't even make it 3 steps before he is tackled from behind.
And the physiological mismatch here is staggering.
Right, I want to explore that, because he just survived a firebombing. How does a guy who has been freezing, then superheated, and is now choking on smoke, manage to fight off an attacker who has just been waiting in the dark?
Well, when you are suddenly exposed to superheated gases and intense smoke, your body undergoes immediate oxygen displacement.
Okay.
Carbon monoxide binds to your hemoglobin much faster than oxygen does. So within seconds, your muscles are starving for fuel.
Which leads to weakness.
Catastrophic muscle weakness and dizziness. The attacker, meanwhile, is fully oxygenated and operating with complete tactical surprise.
It's an ambush. But the fight he describes in the mud is completely devoid of technique. It is just clawing, kicking, eye gouging.
Total desperation.
The attacker is screaming, ripping out his hair, trying to crush his windpipe. The narrator is rapidly losing consciousness from the smoke inhalation.
He's suffocating.
But the sheer monumental dump of adrenaline allows him to shove this screaming maniac off just far enough to scramble to his feet and run blindly into the trees.
Adrenaline is such a powerful, short-term survival mechanism. It masks the pain of injuries and overrides the muscle fatigue caused by the smoke.
But it doesn't last forever.
No, it's a finite resource, and it comes with a severe biological cost once the immediate threat diminishes.
Right. So he runs until his legs simply stop working. He looks back through the trees and sees the cabin fully engulfed, just illuminating the forest like a beacon.
Unbelievable scene.
He crawls under a gap between 2 massive fallen trees and just collapses in the mud. And that's when the crash happens.
Because the endocrine system can only sustain that level of output for a very brief window.
The adrenaline wears off.
Yeah. Once the cortisol and adrenaline recede, the body is left to process all the physical trauma it ignored during the flight response.
He describes going completely numb. He sits in the freezing mud for hours, unable to tell if his body is shaking from the cold rain, the burns, or just the sheer psychological shock of the ambush.
Which is totally understandable.
Eventually, a secondary survival instinct kicks in. He tells himself to move or die because the glow of the fire is dying down and the attacker could be out searching the woods.
He has to keep going.
He blindly pushes through the brush until he miraculously intercepts a hiking trail. This leads him to a road where a random stranger drives him to the nearest hospital.
And the medical assessment there really reveals the physical toll. He suffers second-degree burns on his left forearm and the back of his neck.
He got incredibly lucky.
The physicians note that his survival margin was razor thin. Like, a few more seconds of smoke inhalation inside that cabin would have permanently paralyzed his respiratory system before the fire ever even touched him.
And what happens with the authorities? Nothing.
Nothing at all.
He reports the entire ordeal, but the police are hamstrung. The location was miles off any charted map. The torrential rain basically washed away footprints and DNA in the mud, and the cabin itself was reduced to absolute ash.
There's no crime scene to investigate.
Exactly. He is left to carry the psychological weight of the event entirely on his own without the closure of justice or even an explanation.
It fundamentally changes him.
So what does this all mean for you? How do you apply this horror story to your own threat assessment?
You have to fight your own instincts sometimes.
The biggest takeaway is fighting that triage nurse in your brain, the amygdala hijack. Wilderness experts teach a method called STOP. Stop, think, observe, plan.
That's a lifesaver.
It is a deliberate, forced pause designed to push oxygen back to your prefrontal cortex. Before you rush into a dark structure, before you accept an environment at face value just because you are cold or tired, you force your brain to evaluate the abstract clues.
You look at the details.
You look at the locks, you look at the scratches. You choose the physical discomfort of the storm over the architecture of a trap. This whole ordeal secretly rewrote the rules of this guy's life. He vowed to never trek the backcountry alone again.
And that leads to a necessary, if deeply unsettling, reevaluation of this specific event.
What do you mean?
Well, we focused heavily on the narrator's survival. But consider his role in the attacker's timeline. The narrator was an anomaly.
He's off the grid.
He was miles off the marked trails, caught in a freak, rapidly escalating storm, and he only found that cabin by pure desperate chance.
He wasn't supposed to be there.
Exactly. He was an unintended variable. But the trap itself, highly intentional.
The locks and the accelerant?
The heavy exterior padlock brackets, the permanently disabled windows, the chemical accelerant soaked into the timber. An architect of violence doesn't haul gallons of accelerant and heavy hardware miles into uncharted wilderness on a whim.
No, that takes serious effort.
They built a lethal, highly specific containment and disposal facility, which raises an important question, and perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the entire ordeal.
Yeah.
If the backpacker was just a random accident, who was that cabin actually built for?
Wow. That is a thought that will stick with you. The next time you find yourself seeking shelter, off the grid, far away from the complexities of the world, take a very close look at the hardware on the door. Because sometimes the sanctuary you find was designed to make sure you never leave.